Guys, welcome to my channel on Let's Decode the Hindu. Here we'll be discussing articles relevant from pages of editorial Oped International and Business. And apart from that, the all relevant articles on UPSC perspective are given in the PDF format in the description box. And the relevant timestampings are also provided in the description box for the easier navigation. And now let's go into the session. Freedom and forced labor. This article explains the difference between the meaning of freedom and equal freedom and the current scenario of forced labor in few states in our country, and what our forefathers had interpreted the meaning of equal freedom in the Constitution of India. So the basic purpose of Constitution had been to limit the state power in order to preserve the freedom of individuals. So the meaning of freedom had ignored the fact that the private parties and individuals and corporations, which exercise the great sway over the economic and social life of the nation. So, accordingly, what B.R. Ambedkar had said is that the fundamental rights must also eliminate the possibility of more powerful having the power to impose arbitrary restraints on less powerful by withdrawing from the control he has over the economic life of the people. So this is to tackle the dictatorship of the private employers. So when we take a look into the labor rights of our country, we see the labor movements are the key to the successful freedom struggle during the times of 1931 Karachi Declaration and Bill of Rights. So before a small brief about 1931 Karachi Declaration. So basically, the Gandhi Urban Pact was accepted by Congress in the Karachi session of 1931, which was held in the month of March 26 to 31. Gandhi was nominated to represent Congress in the second roundtable conference. But weeks back, the shadow of Bhagat Singh, shadow of events where the people had been executed, namely Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru, had been executed. So there was anger in public who pointed out that why Gandhi did accept to sign the pact. So they were greeting him with the black flags. So the Karachi session, Congress passed a resolution to endorse the Gandhi Urban Pact and strongly reiterated the goal of Purna Swaraj. So what is this session all about? This session was presided by Sardar Patel, and the earlier draft had been of this session had been drafted by Pandit Nehru. So basically, the Congress adopted a resolution on fundamental rights and economic policy, which represented the party's social, economic, and political program. So it basically demanded fundamental rights and economic policy in all the aspects which represented the party's socio-economic and political programs. So if we see some of the aspects of these resolutions are equality before law, basic civil rights of freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, and elections on the basis of universal adult franchise, free and compulsory primary educations, substantial reduction in rent and taxes, protection of women and peasants, protection of minorities, government ownership or controls of key industries, mines and transports, and also better condition for workers including living wage and limited hours of work. So this session was also talking about the labor wages and other stuff related to labor workers. So now coming back to the discussion, so this labor movement played a key in the time of freedom struggle. So it was acting as a forerunner to constitution, and it expressed the place of labor rights, which is on par with ordinary civil rights such as freedom of speech and expressions. If we see the preamble of a constitution, the political freedom says the political freedom must include a real economic freedom of the millions, which is seen in form of DPSPs in our constitution, which is the directive principles of state policy. And if we see in the form of fundamental rights, it is being enshrined in Article 23 of our constitution. So what primarily the term force means? It is a compulsion that is exerted by serious and enduring differences of power, a compulsion that may not take a physical form but have a social or economic character that is nonetheless as severe. So, if we take the example of the judicial stand, the landmark judgment by the Supreme Court on PUDR versus Union of India says that the right against forced labor included the right to the minimum wage. The court held that the compulsion of economic circumstances, which leaves no choice or alternatives to a person in want and compels him to provide labor or services which is equivalent to the forced labor than any other, and its remedy lay in the basic constitution which guarantees with the minimum wages. So the basic concern is that a rise in the situation of uncertain employment and further fractures within the workforce had made the inequality of power still more stronger and bigger. So the purpose of the labor laws is been to mitigate the imbalance of power between this. So for an example, if we see the labor laws in varied different countries, the shape and form is basically remain the same. So, for in some countries, the workers are being given a stake in private governance through strong trade union laws and mandatory seat for labor in governing boards of the firms. It's a co-determination point. But if we see contrastly in India, the path has been to create a detailed set of laws covering different aspects of the workplace. But at last, the dependency is upon the state for their enforcements. So the current problem which is being faced in our country is that the labor bureaucracy, which is prone to corruption, the adjudicatory mechanisms are inefficient, and the rights that the labor laws grant are effectively submerged in the judicial system. So this basically provides no real relief. So this basically this point needs to be guided by B.R. Ambedkar's insight, where he says the constitutional guarantee against forced labor and the understanding of force and freedom takes into account differences in power. So finally, if we can interpret that the current rules on the of the states show that removing labor laws altogether for a certain period of time, as we can see imposed by few states in our country, which shows the economic power exercised by the capital will be left unchecked, which means the employers. The capital mentioned here is about the employers who employ the laborers. So the power exercised by them are being left unchecked. And what B.R. Ambedkar on fundamental rights says that this would be nothing other than freedom to increase hours of work and reduce the rate of wages. So way forward, if the constitution is to remain a charter of freedom, which means the organization, uh, the authority for freedom, it must be called as a equal freedom, and it must be equal freedom, and that must be the yardstick from which we measure proposed legal changes in the shadow of this current pandemic. Playing out live a narrative of discrimination. This article talks specifically about the tribal groups of Adivasis and how they are being affected by this current pandemic situation. So, the article describes the current declared war on the coronavirus is turning out to be an undeclared war against the workers of India. There are about approximately 10 crore migrant workers in India. Many of them are undocumented. So the social composition of this large labor force are being a major question where it doesn't have any clue. So 20 years ago, the National Sample Survey Office had a survey from the year of 1992 to 93 to 2007 and 2008. The proportion of migrant households among the scheduled tribes was higher than among the other communities. And significantly, the community had large groups of female migrants as well. And the number of Adivasis depend on wage labor is had been increasing. So basically, if we see the job nature of these people, they are cultivators, an agricultural worker, a labor in non-agricultural work, including migrating in search of work, and there are around 45.5 percentage of rural Adivasis who are under below poverty line. So, but basically, in the name of ease of business, taking over the land and forest based resources, which had significantly increased the number of migrant workers from Adivasi communities. Adivasi migration is mainly is for seasonal agricultural conditions and on construction works. So they work in brick kilns or as manual workers in urban areas. So what does the law and rights talk about these interstate migrants? The Interstate Migrant Workmen's Act of 1979 is to be scrapped and it is to be merged with the Labor Code Act, which is recently being set by the central government. So the 1979 law is inadequate, where it deals only with those migrant workers in contractor system and excludes workers who migrate on their own. But the Adivasi migrant employers employed through this contractors, which implies that the payment as well as the travel back home procedures are to be set free for them and they are to be ensured of a safe journey. As per the law, the central government is legally liable to ensure a free travel for them to home, but since it is responsible for the termination of the work because of the lockdown. So the current cause of suffering is that the public distribution system in the Adivasis areas, particularly in hilly regions, and the cause of suffering is mainly because of this, where there is generally irregular uh, supply of daily essentials, which leads to hunger and starvation. So, as a way forward, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme as a project can and should be linked not only to agricultural operations but also for the collections of minus forest produce, what the author says. And now the government had also announced a revised minimum support price for the forest minor producers. But in the absence of the purchasing centers, the distress sales to the middlemen have meant little or no income. And also the annual report from Tribal Affair Ministry has shown the data of shortfalls in various services in Adivasis areas as below, like 20.7 percentage for sub centers and 26 percentage for primary health centers and 23 percentage for community health centers, and the shortfall in number of doctors is as high as 27 percentage. So, as a piece of solution, we can find that the district mineral fund meant for the development of mining affected people, which has a total amount of 35,925 crores till January 2020, can be used in this situation where only 35 percentage had been spent till now, and that too only on infrastructure which would help mining companies. So, in this period, the Supreme Court has also given its highly questionable judgment against the prevailing reservation in school teachers' post for only Adivasis in 5th schedule areas of Andhra and Telangana. So, the many aspects of judgment will have a negative impact as well on the special constitutional provisions for Adivasis, which is enshrined in the 5th schedule, which is beyond the issue of reservation. A welcome change. This article explains how Indian Council of Medical Research had used the plasma therapy for saving the lives of COVID-19 patients and what are its result. So there are three feasibility studies in about 20 severely ill patients, which is found through this therapy, which is to be safe and it is also able to resolve illness and improve the clinical symptoms. So this institution ICMR will instead study plasma safety and efficiency in phase 2 trial, where the patients with moderate symptoms will be randomly assigned to receive either convalescent plasma or any or only standard of care, which is of the control group, which means to say that a standard procedure which is being followed other than convalescent plasma therapy. So the primary outcomes of the trial is conducted in 21 hospitals that will be studied, including the prevention of illness from progressing to a severe form and avoidance of death from all the cases at the time span of 28 days after this plasma infusion. Secondary outcomes will include resolution of symptoms, reduction in hospital stay, and respiratory support. So, what the institute says of this plasma theory is that the requirement for the donor is that the plasma will be collected from donors in time span of 28 days after they make a complete recovery from the illness or are symptom free and have more than required level of antibodies against the novel coronavirus. So, if we see the plasma therapy's benefits in treating measles, chickenpox, and rabies in the country of Guinea, there was no benefit was seen in 2015 on the Ebola patients. So basically, this pandemic provides us an opportunity to ascertain the benefits, clinical benefits of plasma therapy through randomized controlled trials. And the US FDA and India have thus approved the use of plasma from recovered COVID 19 patients only for trial purposes only. But the major concern is that the ICMR's insistence on an evidence based approach to plasma therapy is in contrast to the manner in which it approved the anti-malarial hydrochloroquine. The need for a second chamber. This article talks about the current need for examination of the functions of Rajya Sabha and assess whether it is neither obstructionist or disruptive with governments of the day not having the required numbers and assess its evolving nature. So the basically Rajya Sabha came into being on April 3rd, 1952. Its first session on May 13, 1952 on the same year. So after deep discussion, its a Council of State came into being. After 68 years, it is instructive to revisit the debates on the need for the second Council of States and its performance since then. So the Central Legislature came into being under the Government of Indian Act of 1919 with was a bicameral with a council of states comprising 60 members and the legislative assembly comprising of 145 members. So a note on the Government of India Act of 1919, where it was passed by British Parliament to further expand the participation of Indians in Government of India's working. So it was known to be called as Montague-Chelmsford reforms or simply Montford reforms. So the most notable feature of this act was that to end of benevolent despotism, which means the dictatorship to be ended, and introduce the responsible government in India. This act covered 10 years from 1919 to 1929. So if next we see of the Council of States membership and voting norms, where only the wealthy landowners, merchants, and those with legislative experience were able to enter it, and women were not able to participate in any of the proceedings, and they do not have any rights. And next, the Government of India Act of 1935, which proposed improved version of second chamber, but it was never materialized. The Constituent Assembly, formed in 1947 after adoption of the Constitution, became the Provisional Parliament and made laws till 1952. Now, to take a short note on Government of India Act of 1935. This act was passed by the British Parliament in August 1935. With the 321 sections and 10 schedules, this was the longest act passed by the British Parliament so far, and was later split into two parts, namely the Government of India Act 1935 and Government of Burma Act 1935. So this act ended the system of diarchy introduced by Government of India Act 1919 and provided for establishment of a Federation of India to be made up of provinces of British India and some or all princely states. But however, the federation never came into being, as a required number of princely states did not join it. Now coming back to the analysis. Bicameralism and federalism. So bicameralism is a principle that requires consent of two differently constituted chambers of parliament for making and changing laws. So this was adopted from the US constitution, and 79 parliaments of the world, which constitute 41% of the total number, are bicameral. And if you look at the definition of federalism, it's been since the ancient times the states got together to confer the power of lawmaking on a central authority. But now, currently, given the complexity of geographical, regional, social, economic diversities, marking the constituent units of a federation or a union. So, if we take both these into consideration, they are linked because the federal character of a nation comprising constituent units can be reflected in and secured by a bicameral legislature. So, Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan was the first chairman of the Rajya Sabha, said Parliament is not only a legislative body but also a deliberative one, which enables the members to debate major issues of public importance. So, Lok Sabha is basically had a function to be susceptible to Lok Sabha is basically susceptible to the moments of electoral considerations, which mean the members are being elected by the people. And in the case of Rajya Sabha, the checks had been with the members where it is being expected to have members of wise and well informed with domain knowledge. So the mandate of Rajya Sabha is that to revive or delay legislation without proving a clog in wheel of progress, to represent the interest of states as a federal chamber and be a deliberative body holding high quality debates on important issues. So this is the mandate of Rajya Sabha. Legal but not appropriate. This article talks about the recent change in the labor laws in the states of Himachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, Punjab, and Madhya Pradesh, where the concerned question is that was there any sufficient consultation before all these changes were made? That is, whether the sufficient consultation was being made with the concerned parliament and the state legislatures before being taken by the central and state governments into action. So, the states of Himachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Punjab have extended maximum daily hours of work in factory from 8 to 9 to 12 hours and allowed up to 72 hours a week in overtime. Madhya Pradesh suspended most provisions of Industrial Disputes Act of 1946, except those relating to retrenchment and layoffs, for the period of 1000 days for state undertaking. And the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act will apply to establishments with more than 100 men, which is currently being increased from existing threshold of 50 in line with the Central Act. The ordinance enables the government to exempt establishment from the provision of Labour Welfare Fund. The exemption is to override provisions of some central laws requiring the assent of President or in effect the assent of central government. So here, even though the exemptions are provided, it means to say there needs to be acceptance from President or in from the central government. So the concern here is that was there any sufficient consultation before the changes were being made? So, as per the law, legislature has the authority to make laws. Example, Factories Act allows state governments to exempt factories from provisions of the act during public emergencies for a maximum period of 3 months. But what does a public emergency means? It is defined as a grave emergency whereby the security of India or any part is threatened by war, internal or external aggressions. And now, what the constitutional provision demands is that it is required, permits central and state governments to make laws through the issuance of any ordinance when the legislature is not in session. But such law is required to be ratified by a legislature within 6 weeks of beginning of the next session. But the problem is that the state of Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh are using this procedure and backing its statement that it is being changed as per the law. But the present condition of this ordinance shows that there was not enough importance given to the process of consultation. An act follows a rigorous process of public consultation, scrutiny by committees of parliament, and debates in the House before being approved. So the Parliament consolidated 29 existing laws into 4 codes dealing with wages, occupational safety and health, industrial relations, and social security. The Code on Occupational Safety and Health does not specify the maximum hours of work, but it empowers the government to do so. And the Standing Committee report states that government agreed to incorporate a provision of maximum of 8 hours per day with overtime permitted for certain types of industries. Time for European Union fiscal stimulus. This article describes the recent High Court judgment of Germany's High Court, where it ruled European Central Bank (ECB) had exceeded its mandate in pursuing quantitative easing to rescue the Eurozone from the sovereign debt crisis. So, what basically the quantitative easing means? It refers to the unconventional monetary tool of public sector asset purchases by the ECB, which it has deployed to stimulate the economic demand and stoke inflation in the Eurozone. But there are risks and side effects if we take the consideration of quantitative easing, because it may even cause higher inflation than desired if the amount of easing required is overestimated and too much money is created by the purchase of liquid assets. If on the other hand, the QE can also fail or to spur demand if the banks remain reluctant to lend money to business and households. So the heated up debate in eurozones is that the ECB's bond buying under quantitative easing of over 2.2 trillion euros since 2014 in order to raise the eurozone inflation close to its 2% target. So the issue is that the country of Germany and Netherlands had provided its critic arguments stating that the public debt purchases by the central banks of eurozone member states with ECB's funding, which had amounted to monetary financing of government spending by the ECB, which basically is being barred under the European Union law. So it has to so as to insulate the institution from the political pressure. So under the European Union law, the above mentioned process had been barred, which means to say that the amount which had been bought from ECB by the member states of Eurozones for buying the public debt purchases is amounted to financing of the government spending from the money which had been bought by the ECBs. So this is the problem. So what it says that it is being done to insulate the institution from political pressure. The counter arguments by ECB says that was buying bonds from investors in secondary markets and not directly from governments. And they also say they hold 1/3 of the debt of any country and acquire sovereign assets in proportion to the size of the economy. So this has been taken as a safety guard measure against the potential defaulters by member states. So the given statement by the court has no direct bearing on the ECB's expansion of asset purchases by another 750 billion euros of bonds under the response to COVID-19, and the removal of the ceiling to acquire no more than 1/3 of the country's debt could potentially expose the institution to fresh legal challenges. So basically the need of the hour is that there needs to be a move to mutualize the member states countries, which means the blocks, debt and the governments to infuse a bold fiscal stimulus. And what ECB had said is that it will continue to buy bond program regardless of the implications arising from the court's ruling for the principle of central bank independence. With oil price crash and COVID-19, Saudi Arabia confronts double crisis. So Saudi Arabia is trying to diversify its economy away from the oil sector by expanding into foreign policy. But currently, the economy had been severely hit by the double crisis, namely the COVID-19 and the oil price crash. Basically, the country is whose budget revenues are 87% relevant or dependent on oil sector. So they had increased the value-added tax as a retaliatory measures of the overburdened country, where they had raised the VAT amount of 5% to 15%, and also cutting a cost of living allowance for government employees had been taken in measure as a measure. The crude oil price on December 2019 was around $60 a barrel. So in order to balance its budget this year, $76 a barrel had been fixed as per the report by IMF. But after COVID-19, the situation turned up around, where the dollar price of a barrel was around 26.31. So currently using its a foreign reserve for meeting expenditures, the value had dropped from 24 billion to $479 million. So this has had made the country to raise its debt by borrowing from bond market, and the IMF forecasts the country's GDP as it will fall to 2.3% this year. Apart from this, the kingdom announced a unilateral ceasefire in Yemen after 5 years of war, and it seeks to depart from its expensive military interventions. So, as a point, instead of initiating talk with Russia on a new policies with regard to OPEC plus partnership, the country had rejected Russia and started a completely unwillable oil war. So, as a way forward, the kingdom has to cut expenditure, train its youth for new jobs, build a more accountable and responsive political order. And in terms of foreign policy matters, the engagement with Iran is essential. Mandis linked to e-platform see 65% rise in count post-lockdown. So, in order to boost this e-platform, naming the natural agricultural market, the national digital platform for agricultural trade with the number of connected mandis and the wholesale markets have risen up to 65% since the lockdown. So, ENAM is a pan-India electronic trade portal which networks the almost 7,000 existing mandis run by agricultural product produce market committees, which is named as APMC. It is to create a unified national market for agricultural commodities. So, to promote the real-time price discoveries based on actual supply and demand, this network had been established. It was launched in April 2016, but progress was slower, and no. The reason being that there was no infrastructure in mandis. Farmers are not part of the cooperatives, and many states did not amend the APMC Act, which is the Agricultural Produce Market Committees Act. So the new feature which is being incorporated in ENAM is that a trading module following the FPOs, which is the farmer producer organizations, to trade produce directly from their collection centers without bringing it to mandis. So they are establishing a connection between the FPOs and the customers without bringing it to the mandis, and a warehouse based trading modules and a logistic module offering users tractable transport facilities. So there are about 13 crore farmers in India. So this shows this network has showed an encouraging sign where the more than 1,000 FPOs, which are the farmer producer organizations, are registered under this platform. Bond yields rise as government expands borrowing plan. Here, the yield on most traded 10 years government bonds spiked 20 basis point after the government announced it would increase its market borrowing by more than 4 lakh crore for the financial year of 21. So basically, what is a basic point? So it's a financial term is used as a common unit of measure for interest rates and other percentage in finance. So on the mathematical perspective, we can take 1 BP is equal to 1 by 100th of 1%, or which is equivalent to 1% is equivalent to 100 basis point. So it is used to denote the percentage change in the financial instruments, basically used in bonds and government security purchases of other bonds and securities. So the estimated gross market borrowing in the financial year 2020 to 21 will be 12 lakh crore in the place of 7.80 lakh crore as per the budgeted estimates for 2020 to 2021. So as per the new revised financial year 2021 borrowing calendar, the central government will now borrow first 6 lakh crore in the first half of current financial year against 4.88 lakh crore of the budget which was proposed initially. So the lockdown has led to a lower tax revenue for the government. So there will also be pressures on the yields till the time the Reserve Bank of India announces open market operations to purchase government securities to address the supply glut. And a short note on open market operations, where the open market operations are basically conducted by the RBI. It's a way of sale and purchases of government securities to and from the market with an objective to adjust the rupee liquidity conditions in the market. So basically, the RBI, when it feels that there is an excessive liquidity in the market, it resort to sell the securities, and thereby it will suck out the rupee liquidity. Similarly, when the liquidity conditions are tight, RBI will buy the bonds from the market, and thereby releases its liquidity into the market. So, as a last note in this article, it says that unless the RBI, unless it takes any assertive actions on funding the government's market loans, there will be a condition which remains an overhanging on the part of government security markets. Thank you guys for watching the video, and that's the end of today's news analysis. And the relevant fact check points and know abouts are being written down in the last page of the PDF and being given in the description box. And please do like, share if you like the video, and please do subscribe. Thank you.